You're on patrol. Your squad just fought through an ambush. The enemy withdrew. You're securing the area, checking bodies, making sure no one's playing dead, waiting to throw a grenade. And then you find him, an enemy soldier, maybe 19 years old. He's gut-shot, bleeding badly. He's conscious, looking at you with terrified eyes. He knows he's dying. He knows you could kill him right now and nobody would question it. Or you could help him, try to save his life. Your squad is watching, waiting to see what you'll do. And in this moment, you have to make a choice that will define who you are. Will you help him? This is about one of the most difficult moral decisions soldiers faced in Vietnam: what to do with wounded enemy soldiers. The Geneva Convention says you're supposed to provide medical care, that wounded enemy soldiers become prisoners of war and are entitled to treatment. But the reality on the ground was more complicated, more morally ambiguous, more human. This is about the choices soldiers made, the internal conflicts they faced, and how these decisions haunted them for the rest of their lives. Let me start with what you're supposed to do. According to military law and the Geneva Convention, once an enemy soldier is wounded and no longer a threat, they're a prisoner of war. You're required to provide medical treatment, to evacuate them along with your own wounded, to treat them humanely. This is clear. This is the rule. But rules and reality are different things in combat. You're looking at this wounded enemy soldier. Let me explain what's going through your mind. First, this person was trying to kill you 10 minutes ago, was shooting at you, at your friends, your brothers. Maybe he succeeded. Maybe one of your guys is dead or wounded because of this soldier. The adrenaline from the firefight is still pumping through your system. You're angry. You're scared. You're looking at someone who represents everything that's trying to kill you.
Second, you're exhausted. You've been in the field for days. You're low on supplies, low on water. Medical supplies are limited. Your medic has barely enough to treat your own wounded. Every bandage used on this enemy soldier is one less bandage for your guys. If someone in your squad gets hit tomorrow, that bandage might be the difference between life and death. That's a practical consideration that weighs on you. Third, there's the tactical situation. You're still in enemy territory. Taking a prisoner means slowing down, means dedicating soldiers to guard him, to carry him if he can't walk. This makes your patrol more vulnerable, takes resources away from security, increases your risk. You have to weigh helping this enemy soldier against the increased danger to your own men. Fourth, there's the trust issue. Even wounded enemy soldiers have killed Americans, played dead and then thrown grenades, detonated booby traps, turned their wounds into weapons. You don't know if this soldier has a grenade hidden, has a knife, has anything that could hurt you or your squad. Getting close to him is a risk. And fifth, there's what you've seen. Maybe you've watched enemy soldiers commit atrocities. Maybe you've seen what they do to American prisoners. Maybe you've seen bodies of soldiers who were captured and tortured. That creates rage, creates a desire for revenge, makes it harder to see this wounded enemy soldier as a human being deserving of help. But there's another side, another voice in your head. This is a human being, a person. He's scared, he's dying, he's someone's son, maybe someone's father or brother. Strip away the uniforms and the war, and he's just a kid, like you, like your buddies, caught up in something bigger than himself. And he's suffering, in terrible pain, looking at you not as an enemy, but as the only person who can help him.
The decision you make in this moment says something about who you are, about what kind of person the war has made you, about whether you can still see the humanity in your enemy. This isn't an academic question. This is immediate, real, with consequences. Different soldiers made different choices. Some soldiers always provided care, every time. Didn't matter how they felt, didn't matter what the enemy had done. Their sense of morality, their adherence to the rules, their basic humanity demanded they help. These soldiers treated enemy wounded the same as their own, called in medevacs for them, used their medical supplies, took the risk. They did this because it was the right thing to do, because they refused to let the war make them into something they weren't. Other soldiers refused to help, couldn't do it, wouldn't do it. They'd seen too much, lost too many friends. They looked at wounded enemy soldiers and felt nothing but rage, nothing but the desire for revenge. These soldiers would walk past wounded enemy without stopping, or worse. Some finished them off, put a bullet in them, ended their suffering quickly, but also ended any chance of survival. These soldiers justified it different ways. He would have died anyway. He tried to kill us. He doesn't deserve help. This is war. Most soldiers fell somewhere in between, made decisions case by case. Sometimes helped, sometimes didn't, depending on the situation, depending on their mood, depending on what had happened that day. This moral inconsistency bothered some of them later, made them question their own character. If you help enemy wounded on Monday, but not on Tuesday, what does that say about you? There are documented cases that illustrate different approaches. One account from 1968 describes a firefight where an American squad killed several enemy soldiers and found one wounded survivor. The squad's medic immediately started treating him, used American medical supplies, stopped the bleeding, called for medevac. The wounded enemy soldier survived, was taken prisoner. Later, intelligence officers interrogated him and got valuable information about enemy positions. The medic's decision to help saved American lives down the line. Another account from the same year describes a different outcome. A platoon was ambushed, took casualties. Several Americans were killed. After the firefight, they found wounded enemy soldiers. The platoon sergeant ordered his men not to help them, left them where they were, no treatment, no evacuation. The platoon moved on. The reasoning was cold but practical. We don't have the supplies to waste on them. We need everything for our guys. The wounded enemy soldiers probably died. Nobody knows for sure. A third account is more disturbing. A squad found a wounded enemy soldier after a firefight. The squad had taken casualties. One of their most popular members had just been killed. The soldiers were enraged. One soldier walked up to the wounded enemy and shot him. Execution. The squad leader reported it as the enemy soldier reaching for a weapon, justified killing. But other members of the squad knew the truth, knew it was murder. Some of them carried that guilt for decades, wondered if they should have stopped it, wondered if their silence made them complicit. The military officially prohibited executing wounded enemy soldiers. It was a war crime. Soldiers who did it could be court-martialed, but enforcement was inconsistent. In the chaos of combat, it was hard to prove what happened, hard to know if a wounded enemy was actually reaching for a weapon. Many questionable killings were written off as legitimate. The rules existed, but the reality was murky. Some soldiers found a middle ground. They'd provide basic first aid, but nothing more. Stop the worst bleeding, make the enemy soldier comfortable, but not call for medevac, not use significant medical resources. This satisfied their conscience. They didn't let someone bleed to death in front of them, but didn't put their own squad at risk or use resources needed for Americans. The enemy soldier might still die later, but at least they tried something.
The decision was influenced by the perceived age of the enemy soldier. A wounded teenager was harder to ignore than a wounded adult. Looking at a kid, maybe 16 or 17 years old, bleeding out, made it harder to walk away. Many soldiers reported that wounded young enemy soldiers were treated more humanely than older ones. This doesn't make logical sense from a military perspective, but emotionally, it's understandable. A kid looks more innocent, more like a victim, easier to see as human rather than enemy. The presence of a medic mattered too. Medics had a different mindset. They were trained to save lives, all lives. Many medics would treat enemy wounded automatically. It was their job, their calling. They couldn't turn off that instinct just because the patient was the enemy. Some medics treated more enemy wounded than their own guys, simply because they survived the firefights and needed help. The medics did their job, regardless. But medics also faced pushback. Other soldiers would question them. Why are you wasting supplies on them? Why are you helping someone who was trying to kill us? The medic had to balance their medical ethics against the morale of their unit. Some medics stopped treating enemy wounded because it caused too much conflict with their squads. Others continued, regardless of what anyone thought. The Vietnamese culture complicated things. Many American soldiers didn't see Vietnamese people as fully human. The racism was real and pervasive. Terms like gook dehumanized the enemy, made it easier to kill them, made it easier to deny them help when wounded. If you don't see someone as human, you don't feel obligated to help them. This racism was a psychological tool that helped soldiers cope with killing, but it also made atrocities easier, made cruelty easier, made ignoring wounded enemy soldiers easier. Some soldiers had moments of clarity, moments where the human connection broke through. There's an account of a soldier who initially refused to help a wounded enemy, walked past him, but then heard the enemy soldier crying, calling for his mother, just like American soldiers did when they were dying. That sound broke through the soldier's defenses, made him realize this was a human being. He turned back, provided first aid, called for medevac, said later that he couldn't live with himself if he hadn't. That cry for mother was universal, transcended the war.
Other soldiers had the opposite experience. Started out willing to help, but then had experiences that hardened them. Saw enemy soldiers fake surrender and then attack. Saw booby-trapped bodies. Saw American prisoners who'd been tortured. These experiences created a shell, made them unable to see enemy soldiers as deserving of mercy, self-protection, psychological survival. The long-term psychological impact of these decisions was significant. Soldiers who helped wounded enemy generally felt good about those decisions later, felt like they maintained their humanity in an inhumane situation. These soldiers could look back and say they did the right thing, that they followed the rules, that they stayed human. This gave them peace. Soldiers who didn't help, who walked past wounded enemy, or who killed them, had more complicated feelings. Some had no regrets, felt they did what needed to be done. War's hell, and you do what you must to survive. But others struggled, had guilt, nightmares, wondered if they'd crossed a line they shouldn't have crossed, wondered if refusing to help someone who was suffering made them a bad person. The soldiers who witnessed executions or atrocities but didn't stop them often carried the most guilt. They weren't the ones who pulled the trigger, But they didn't intervene. They let it happen. That passive participation haunted them, made them question their own courage and morality. If you see something wrong and don't stop it, are you responsible? Many soldiers grappled with this question for decades. The military's official position was clear: help wounded enemy, follow the Geneva Convention, treat prisoners humanely. But the reality was that individual soldiers made individual choices based on their circumstances, their experiences, and their personal moral codes. The military couldn't control every decision made in the chaos of combat, and many soldiers felt abandoned by that, felt like they were put in impossible situations and then judged for whatever choice they made.
Some soldiers tried to rationalize their decisions. If I help this enemy soldier, he'll be interrogated and might provide intelligence that saves American lives. If I don't help him, I'm preventing a future threat. He can't fight again if he dies. Both rationalizations make some sense. Both are ways of making yourself feel better about a decision that has no good answer. The truth is, there was no universal right answer. The situation was too complex, too contextual. A decision that made sense in one situation might be wrong in another. A soldier might help enemy wounded in one firefight and refuse in another, and both decisions could be justified based on the specific circumstances. The moral ambiguity was part of what made Vietnam so psychologically damaging. You're standing over this wounded enemy soldier. He's looking up at you, waiting. Your squad is behind you, also waiting. You have maybe 30 seconds to decide. Do you call for your medic? Do you use your own first aid supplies? Do you try to save this person who is trying to kill you minutes ago? Or do you walk away? Or do you end his suffering with a bullet? Whatever you choose, you'll carry it with you forever. If you help him, you might wonder later if that was worth the risk you took, worth the supplies you used. If you don't help him, you'll wonder if you could have saved him, if refusing to help makes you a monster. There's no good choice, just choices and consequences. And the knowledge that in that moment, you had to decide who you were going to be. This is one of the questions that haunt Vietnam veterans. Not the big battles, not the famous operations, but these small, personal moral decisions. What did I do when confronted with a wounded enemy? Did I stay human? Did I lose my humanity? Did I do the right thing? And the fact that there's no clear answer to what the right thing was makes it harder, makes the guilt and the doubt persist. You find a wounded enemy soldier. Will you help him? That's the question. And whatever answer you give, whatever choice you make, you'll live with it for the rest of your life.